Alright, I was taking a look at what is to become Lecture 1C, and I realized what I wanted to use has some other stuff on the front of it. So here we are on Tuesday afternoon. I am going to try my best to splice this introduction with the original remaining part of the lecture that's going to become 1C, and we'll see how it all fits together. Wish me luck. So the very first thing we need to use our software to do is to read in some data from a file, so that what we can do then is to do some analysis with it. So we have some things we're going to see how to read. Spreadsheet data saved in this fashion, which I will show you shortly. Delimited data such as values separated by spaces, and actual Excel spreadsheets, which are a bit more fiddly, and we'll deal with that afterwards. So let's see if we can make that go. As always, we're going to need library tidyverse, so let's see if we can run that first. We will run library tidyverse first, and after a few seconds away that will go. That looks good. So here's a spreadsheet. This is a spreadsheet that I made up. The data is completely made up and has no meaning whatever, but it's a spreadsheet. And suppose we want to read that into R so we can do something with it. So let's see if we can do that. Now, the first thing we've got to get hold of is the spreadsheet itself. So let's grab it. Alright, see if this link will work. Alright, we're going to open link. And this is going to invite us to download that spreadsheet, so we'll do that, and I'll stick it in downloads because that seems to be a good place. And so while that downloads, it won't take very long. Then if you want to open it, you can click on it, and if you have Excel opened, if you have Excel ready, it will open it in that. I don't have Excel, so it will use LibreOffice for me. And we will see shortly that we have that same spreadsheet. There it is. Now, the problem immediately is that this is not the right format to read it into R. And so the easy way to solve that is to save this as, and then you're looking for down here something like, come here, you're looking for something like text CSV, which is down near the bottom of mine. There it is. So this will save it as a file format called a CSV. And it appears to be called test brackets 1. And that's also going in downloads because I haven't changed that. Okay. And then we'll let it do that, and we'll let it do that. And now we have a file called test1.csv by the looks of it. And that is a format that we can read into R. Now, what you will also need to do, where's RStudio Cloud, is to get this into a place where you can actually see it. And I have only my lecture notebook, so I'm going to show you all my windows, and we'll make this a bit small. So, as it turns out, what did I call it? I actually have that thing there, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what you would have to do, which is to upload the file. So that's where we want to go, and we need to find the file, and it was in downloads. And it was actually this file called test brackets 1 CSV. So we'll upload that, and there it goes. Now we see it in our files. This is actually not our files. In our files, it should be near the top. Alright. So there is test1 brackets 1.csv. And then the next thing we've got to do is we've got to read that in. So I'm going to go back to my notebook, and here's a handy keyboard shortcut. Control-Shift-0 shows all 4 windows. Control-Shift-1 just shows you the notebook that you're looking at. The other way you can do that is View, and then Panes, and then pick the one you want. Show all panes or zoom the source, which is what we just did. So, here is our spreadsheet. We've grabbed the spreadsheet, we saved it as a CSV, and if you want to actually see what it looks like, you can do that too. So now we have this file with a funky name, which we're going to open. That's what a CSV looks like. A CSV has things in it separated by commas. It's called comma-separated values. And the columns are called ID, X, Y, and group, and the values are as you see under there. And because comma is not something that commonly occurs in data, you can use it to separate one value from the next, and you're not likely to run into any trouble. So this is a format that R can read in. So, having got it to this point, what we have to do is we have to do read CSV with the name of the file. Now, I don't know why that happened there, so we're going to get rid of that. Okay. Now, it wasn't called test1, it was called test1 space bracket 1 dot dot CSV. It was the actual name of the file, so that should work. Now, this we now know worked because it tells us what it read in. And we know what we were expecting. We were expecting a column of people IDs, a column of number values called X and Y, and a column of group values which were also text. If you remember, that was what this spreadsheet looked like. And so this tells us this is what it read in. Col character is shorthand for text. Col double is shorthand for a decimal, possibly number. And double comes from computer science. It comes from double precision floating point number, which means a decimal number. And so if it's thinking it might be treating the numbers as decimals, it will read them in this way. So that looks as if it worked. If it didn't read 4 columns, then we know we've got trouble. So this appears to have worked. Now, what I didn't do is to actually have a look at it, and that's down here. If you type the name of something, it shows you what it contains. There is our spreadsheet in R terms. It's a thing called a data frame. It has rows and columns. Each column has a name, and each row corresponds to one person. So the column called ID identifies people numbered 1 through 6. The X and Y are the numeric values of X and Y for that person. And they were in some group which was called upper or lower. That might be like a treatment group. So when you read in data, this is a little bit off-center now, but you read in the data using the file name or using the URL, which we'll see shortly. Read in the data using the file name. That gives you what it read in, and then you look at it to see what you've got. And it will tell you what you've got. And when you read in data, the first thing you should do is look at it and say, do I have what I thought I was going to have? Do I have 4 columns and 6 rows? Yes, I do. Check. That's the first thing you should do when you read data in. So that's RStudio Cloud. There was an download the file to your computer, upload it to RStudio Cloud, and then read it in. So it's a 3-step process. Now, if you are working on your computer, if you happen to have RStudio on your computer, there is a slightly different approach you can use. Either you can just type the name of the file, or you can find it first. And now I have to go to RStudio on my computer, wherever that went, here, and run it here, because now I'm running RStudio on my computer, which you can tell because it's blue. And if I run this thing called file choose, I'm going to run all the rest of it too. Excuse me. Okay, I need a library tidyverse, which I don't have, so I'm going to run that first. Library tidyverse. Okay, good. And then I'm going to find the file. Here we go. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the file, and what this does is it brings up a file chooser like you would use for opening a file in Word or something like that. And the file we wanted was in downloads, and it was this thing called test1.csv. So if I click on open now, it doesn't actually open it, it just saves the thing that we, in F, the name of the place where the file is, which is how it looks. This is how it looks for me. If you're on Windows, it'll look different. And then, because F contains a file, you can read CSVF, and that will work just the same way. And once again, you can look at it and see what it contains. The same thing. So if you have a file that lives on your computer, you can use FileChoose to find it. If you have a file that lives on RStudio Cloud, you upload it first, which will put it in the same folder as you're working with your notebook. And then you can read it indirectly from there. So that was the end of the aside. So that was read CSV. And you look at what you read in. Here's another way of looking at whatever you read in, however you read it in. It's called capital V view. And if you do that, what it will do is it will pop up another tab up here with the name of your data frame in it. And it gives you a quick view of the whole thing. And usually you can see more of it this way than you can see over here. This will give you up to 10 rows and might run you out of columns, but this gives you lots of room. And you can once again check, I had 6 people and I had 4 columns. So that makes sense. And you can do a few more things with this. You can do a filter. Where is my filter? There is my filter. So say I wanted the people only in the upper group. And now I've just got the 3 people that were in the upper group. Or if I delete that, that will show everybody again. So this is filter. Or what I can also do is I can sort values in order. If I click on these invisible little arrows next to Y, this will sort them in ascending order, and if you click again, it will sort them in descending order, and it will rearrange the people to match. So you have a few things you can play with. So this is good for looking at data. The problem is, where are my notes? Here. The only problem with this is, though it looks nice, it won't be part of what you hand in for an assignment, whereas the other one will. And you can't edit data this way, it's read-only. So, what else did I say? Yes, I said that. Alright, good. Let's go back to where we were here. This is the view, we'll get rid of that now. And one thing that I will mention right now is this is a tibble or data frame. You will be working with data frames a lot in RStudio, so get used to how they look. Column names in bold, a number of rows, a value in each space, so that data frames are rectangles. They have a certain number of rows and a certain number of columns. As many columns as variables, as many rows as observations. And if you don't have something like that, you have some work to do, which we will be doing later on. So that's viewing. Okay. Alright. Sometimes what you want to do is you want to summarize what you read in because there's too much of it. So I'm going to get rid of this. And there is a thing called summary. And what summary does... No, I don't want that. Go away. This is what summary does. For each column, it gives you a summary of it. If it's a numeric column like X is, it gives you the min and max, and it gives you the mean, and it gives you the rest of the 5-number summary. Likewise, Y. And so this is a handy way of checking that you have the right kind of values, because you probably have some kind of idea about what the mean should be, or what the median should be, or the largest or the smallest values. And typically what happens is if you have an error, the smallest value is way too small or the biggest value is way too big, and here you will see it. So this is a quick way of checking for errors. Likewise, all the text variables are summarized as just how many values there are. There were 6, and that makes sense. There are ways around that, but this gives you a quick summary at least of the numerical values. Now I don't know what that is. We'll get rid of that. Now, that was reading things in from files on your computer, and there was a bit of a two-step involved in getting them into RStudio Cloud. It's actually easier to read things in from URLs, which seems kind of weird, but that's what we're going to do, and that's what you will most likely do. So this URL here, which is here, is a CSV with a file in it. And we're going to read that in directly from the URL. We don't need to look at it. We don't need to download it and save it anywhere. We can just get hold of it directly from here. So this was a file I saved some time ago. And what you do is you use the URL instead of the file name. And the way I like to do this is to save the URL somewhere first, call it my URL usually, and then read in from that. And the reason I do that is because URLs tend to be long. You could put the whole URL in here, but it would be rather long and this line would go over to here. So save the URL first, read in from it, and that will give us a data frame. It read it in with 3 columns, a text column called warehouse and 2 numerical columns called size and cost. And we can have a look at that. And there were 10 rows altogether. There were 2 warehouses, A and B. These were shipments that arrived at the given warehouse. The size column is how big the shipment was, and the cost column is how much it costs to process the items per item, I think. So it doesn't matter much about what that is, but reading from a URL is actually straightforward, because what you do is you put the URL in a variable, and you can copy and paste it from the assignment statement or wherever it is. Read in from the URL, check that you got the right number and kind of columns, and then have a look at them. That's the process you'll be doing a lot. And it's as well after you've read and dated, first of all to look at it, and second of all to make some kind of assertion that's what you thought it would be. Typically I will tell you what variables to expect, and you can see if you have them. So here is something different. Here is a file where the values are separated by 1 space. So we've got a column called cup and a column called temp diff, and they have exactly 1 space between them, as you can check all the way down. And they are not lined up. This is just the way they happen to go. But you know where one column ends and the next one begins because it has a space in between. And this is often helpful, except it doesn't work if the first column is, for example, somebody's name, which might have spaces in it, and then we don't quite know what to do. So let's see if we can read that in. Now where did my code go? My code was in here. My code was not in here. Where did my code go? Let's get rid of this as well. There. Now it's actually in a file that I already have on RStudio Cloud, so I should be able to just read this in, and it does work. Likewise, this will work with the URL, etc., etc. Place to read it from, and then things the values are separated by, in this case, a single space. And we have 2 columns, a column called cup, which is text, and a column called temp diff, which is a number. We can have a look at that. So what this particular setup was 4 different brands of travel coffee cup. Back in the days when you weren't wearing a mask and you could actually drink coffee while you were on the bus or the subway. And so these are 4 different brands of cup, Starbucks and Sig, and there are others. And the temp diff column was what they did was they put coffee in the cup, and then they closed up the cup and opened it up again half an hour later, and they measured how many degrees Fahrenheit the temperature of the coffee had decreased. So a smaller temp diff is good. Now, one thing I will show you, while I have this handy, is it tells you there are 32 rows. And if you want to see more of the rows, you can click on this next over here. Those are the 4 brands of cups. These are rows 31 and 32. Or you can click on a number which says give me page 3, which is rows 21 through 30, if you want to look at that. So you can just quickly scroll through and make sure you have all the data you were expecting. So we have another one of read lim, reading from the web. Here is a file with the URL. Save the URL in a variable, read in from that, and the values are separated by spaces. And what you can do if you want to check what you have is you can copy the URL. If I can do that, I want that T on the end. There we go. Copy that. Then we'll have another tab over here, and we'll paste the URL in there. And this is what the file actually looks like. And you can see there's one space, one space, one space, one space, one space, one space, all the way down. 27 rows. And so that's going to read in with read lim perfectly well. So we know this is going to work. Read lim from the URL which we just defined. And then we'll have a look at that. This is what it read in. The case number, which is a number, the scrap and the speed, which were numbers, and the production line, which was text. So let's see if we can actually have a look at that. This is what it looks like. Again, a data frame, 27 rows, 4 columns with a value in each. 27 observations, numbered 1 through 27. And what this was a production line for making soap. And what they were doing was that they had 2 different production lines, A and B. And they ran each production line at a different speed to see how much scrap there was. And scrap is soap that could not be used for making bars of soap. So this is like ivory soap or something like that. This is soap that could not be used. And the more scrap you have, the worse. The less scrap you have, the better, because you're not wasting soap. But on the other hand, if you run the production line faster, you are making more good bars of soap as well as more scrap. So it's not quite clear where the dividing line comes. Again, click on next to see some more of it. Production line B is at the bottom. Now, here's another one. And I have a screenshot to show you for this one. Maybe I'll show you the screenshot in the slides because it's a bit bigger. Here it is. This is measurements on 3 different drugs. I don't know, hours of pain relief or something like that. And this is not read lim, because even though those headings are separated by 1 space, the values of the actual data are not. The values of the data are lined up underneath the drug they belong to. And if you look carefully here, see that space after drug A and before drug B? That's actually a space all the way down. And the actual values for drug A are on the left of that space, and the values for drug B and C are on the right. So this is aligned in columns, and there is a space that goes all the way down, separating one column from the next. Need water. Alright, how are we going to read that in? Here's what we had. We're going to use another read, which is called read underscore table. So let's read that in. That read in drug A, drug B, drug C as 3 numeric columns, and you can check those numeric values are right. Looks as if they are. So read underscore table is used for reading in values that are aligned in columns with variable numbers of spaces between them. So depending on what you have, then the way in which you read it in is different. Alright, we're going to finish with reading an Excel sheet indirectly, and I'm going to get rid of that sheet that we had. What I did was I actually tidied up my spreadsheet from what I had before, so I'm going to show it to you here because it's bigger. Here it is. If you look carefully, it now has two tabs. It has a tab called Data, which is the one we want, and it has another tab called Notes, which we didn't want. There might be some notes about what the variables are. So we're going to have to install a package first. The one we need is called Read Excel. So I didn't seem to do that, so I'm going to do that now. So I'm going to, where are we? I didn't want there. I want there, and I want to insert. Where is insert? Insert R. There we go. And the way you install anything is called install packages, and then you put the name of the package, Read Excel. But you want it in quotes. Now remember the trick. That's the one I want. It actually puts it in quotes for you. The other way of doing it is if I had typed this, and I had said, oh, but I need that to be in quotes, and I got to this point, what you do is you go back and select the whole word, and Control Shift left arrow will select the whole word, or Command Shift on a Mac, and then you can type an open quote, and it will put the closing quote in for you. So I don't think I have this installed, so I'm going to install it now. Okay, I actually do have it installed. Alright, yes, we'll do that. And so now it's installing Read Excel. And as always with the way on RStudio Cloud, it seems to do nothing for a few minutes. And then it tells you what it's doing. And then it downloads the package and then it installs it. So I don't know whether this is very big. I don't think it is. There it is. That's downloading it. That's installed it. Okay, good. So let's go back to our notebook. And I'm going to run everything that we had so far. Alright, so now we're going to use library read Excel to actually use it like we do with library tidyverse. And then I have a local copy of this which I call test2.xlsx. It's an Excel spreadsheet. If you have a local copy of it, then you can read this. We'll talk about what to do if you don't. And I want to read that whole spreadsheet in, and I want the sheet in it called Data. So let's see if we can make that work. And that looks as if it did work. That is that same thing again. Now, what to do if you don't have that as a local file already? Well, first of all, you've got to download it. But there is actually an R version of doing it. I don't need this. So let me give you a little bit of extra. This is the extra on the end of today. I can't type extra. T-R-A. There we go. So let's make ourselves a new code chunk, which I did with the keyboard shortcut, which is Control-Alt-I for insert. So now we've got a new code chunk. Let's see what we can do with that. We need to do two things. I'll explain all of this in a minute. So we're going to create a temporary file. And this will depend on TMP. There we go. My typing improves gradually. What this is doing is it's creating a temporary file on my computer that we're going to use to download that spreadsheet into, and then we're going to throw it away again afterwards. Because the only thing we need it for is to download that spreadsheet into. And I have a fly in front of my face. Go away. Alright. So that's the first thing, create a temporary file. And then we're going to make another code chunk, and we're going to say download file, which is there. And notice how R supplies you with that. And in the tooltip, it says URL destination file. Alright, so the URL is where that file was. So we'll copy that. I had it somewhere. Where did I put it? I don't remember where I put it. I don't remember where I put it. So let's see if we can figure out where it was. This is where I think it is. And you can watch my appallingly bad typing. UTSC. Toronto. Dot ca / swivel. This is me. This is where I think I put it. And what was it called? It was called test 2, I think. Yes. Let's see if it's actually here. If not, I'll kill this and we can record it again. So we're going to download that file and we're going to download it into temp. We'll see if that worked. It didn't because it didn't find it. Oh, because I mistyped it. Try it again. Didn't work. Okay, not found. Alright. But this is the procedure which you do it. You download it from the URL. And that's because I typed the wrong URL. Because it should say C32. Genius. That works. So downloaded that file. And now temp contains a copy of that file. And now we can read Excel. Temp. And say sheet equals data. And that is that same spreadsheet again. So after all my struggles, and with a bit of good memory from years ago, we actually found out where that file was coming from. So let me just review that process, because that was kind of a weird thing, and I got it wrong in the middle. Alright, here we go. First thing, create a temporary file for it to live in. It doesn't matter what the name of that temporary file is because it's going to be used once and then thrown away. And your system may have a different setup for creating temporary files. If you're on Windows, you probably have a special folder for creating temporary files. Then download the file from the URL. You can use the my URL thing again if you want to. Download that into this file called temp. And now temp has a copy of this which is on your computer or on RStudio Cloud in this case. And then read that in as if it was just a local file. Read from temp and read the sheet called data, and that works. So that was a bit of extra as to how you can get hold of an Excel file that's on the web somewhere. And you can read it indirectly. Now, that brings us to the end of all of this. But I wanted to say that that was the end of this. So I wanted to make sure that you have a couple of ideas in your head. So we started with a spreadsheet, and the first thing we did was to save it as a CSV, because that's the standard way of moving information from spreadsheets into other things, and it's just plain text. I'll say something about CSVs here, which I forgot to mention before, which is CSVs do not preserve formulas. If you have formulas in your spreadsheet, they will be lost, and all that will be kept is the values that the formula is evaluated to. So my take on this is don't do any calculations in your spreadsheet. Just use your spreadsheet as a place to record your data. Do all your calculations in R, because that's going to be much more reproducible. Only have data in your spreadsheet. If you want to draw graphs, if you want to do calculations, do them in R. Just have them plain numbers in your spreadsheet. Alright, end of rant. So save your spreadsheet as a CSV and then read it in using read CSV. That's easiest. All you need is the file name or the URL. If you have a URL, my recommendation is save it somewhere and then read in from the URL. That works with read CSV or with read of any of the others. Read_delim reads space-limited files like this one. Read_delim, and after the name of the file you say what the delimiter character is, a space. Read_delim also works with URLs, as we saw with the SOAP data. Data inlined in columns, you want read_table. And that works for this data. And that's what we got. And the last thing we did was reading an Excel sheet indirectly. Install the package readXL first, then use read_Excel like this with the name of the file or its URL. No, the name of the file, not a URL, and with the sheet from it that you want, if there's more than one. The last thing was an extra, which I messed up, so let me go through that again. It wasn't there. It was over here, which is what to do with an Excel file that's on the web, not on your computer. So, this is the whole R way of doing it. Create a temporary file for it to live in temporarily until you read it in. Download from the URL to that temporary file. Read the file in from that temporary file. Get your data frame. So it's a kind of multi-step process. Create a temporary file. Download your spreadsheet of the URL into that temporary file, and then read in from that temporary file. It's a way of working around the file not being local to begin with. This is a way of doing that. And now you know all there is to know about reading in files. One last thing I will add, and I wanted to mention in the context of read table. You might, if you have run into R before, have run into a thing called read.table. And we are not using that in this course, and if you use that in this course, you are revealing that you didn't listen to me. All the read things that we use in this course are read_something. Read_CSV, delim, table. There are others, but this will do for now. And so that's what I expect you to use in this course. Alright, I am done for today.